Gene Silva will dismantle Diego Lopes.
Noche UFC, Mexican Independence Day. September 13th, Diego Lopes will be taking on Gene Silva, who's on a 13-fight win streak, with every one of those ending by finish.
Silva!
This guy is special, John. His ability to land shots at the right time. It reminds me of Conor McGregor in his prime.
Diego Lopes!
Lopes is big for this division. Long and dangerous boxing.
This dude is an absolute savage. He's so fun. He's so explosive, and he's got it rolling.
He's so dangerous, man. It's not just that he's good, he's fucking scary.
Gene vs Diego are set for the main event of UFC Noche, and although Lopes has had a lot of momentum, and although Lopes has been a very formidable force at 145, I'm here to tell you that Gene Silva will not only win at UFC Noche, but he'll dominate and find a finish over Diego Lopes. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm JuicyMMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. Also be sure to hit that join button for exclusive channel perks. But anyways, let's get into it. Ever since making it to the UFC, Gene Silva has been on an absolute rocket ship. From his UFC debut against Charles Jourdain at UFC 303 to his most recent performance against Bryce Mitchell at UFC 314, Gene Silva has done a couple different things in all of his fights thus far. He's dominated, he's won very easily against most of his opponents, but also he's been able to find finishes in every one of his fights. So based on all that domination that Gene has had thus far, a lot of fans, including myself, see this guy as a potential champion, and of course if he's able to beat Diego Lopes, he'll probably get a title shot next, or he'll at the very least be very close to getting one. But I think that domination over the years from Gene Silva is another reason for why fans are extremely excited about this fight versus Lopes, as Lopes by far is going to be the toughest opponent that Gene has ever went up against. He's going to be significantly more dangerous and just a significantly better fighter than any of the guys Silva has went up against in the past, so it's going to be very interesting to see if Gene can continue to dominate even against Diego Lopes. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why do I think Gene Silva is going to dominate and dismantle Diego Lopes? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first factor I want to touch upon is a technical ability. Because when you look at Gene Silva out there, he does play around a little bit, or at least it seems like it, but at the end of the day, Silva is an extremely technical striker out there. He does a great job at setting things up, and he does a great job at ultimately finding those huge shots landing. And I think in a fight against Diego Lopes, that technical ability is going to be even more apparent and even more important. As when you look at Diego Lopes, yes, he does have some technical ability, but for the most part, a lot of Diego's success is due to the fact that he's so physical. He does a great job at hitting extremely hard, overwhelming his opponents, and he's able to take a shot really well. And I think for the most part, outside of his Volkanovski fight, that's a big reason for why Lopes has been able to have so much success. But when you go into a fight against Gene Silva, who's going to be a lot more technical, at least in my opinion, than Diego Lopes, I think that's really going to shine through. Because in those blitzes that Diego Lopes goes for, I think Gene Silva will be technical enough to step over to the side and counter effectively on the blitzes of Lopes. But even besides when Diego is blitzing, I think Gene is going to be good enough and technically superior than Diego Lopes that even when Gene is on the offensive, he's going to do a great job at mixing things up and being able to find his shots and land effectively on Diego Lopes. So I do think the overall technical differences between these two guys on the feet is going to be a huge factor in this fight. But the next factor for why I think Gene Silva is going to dominate Diego Lopes is due to the physicality. Because as I touched upon before, Diego Lopes is very physical. He has a lot of success by being more physical than his opponents. He can take a shot really well, and he can also hit extremely hard. And I think we've seen a lot of times in the past in some of Lopes's fights fights is during those blitzes, he's eventually able to land a big shot and he's able to drop or even knock out some of his opponents. He was even able to drop Alexander Volkanovski, even though, in my opinion at least, Volkanovski is a significantly more technical striker than Diego Lopes is. But in this fight against Gene Silva, I think Gene has a very similar amount of physicality to Diego Lopes. Gene thus far throughout his career has shown a great ability to hit extremely hard as well as take a shot very, very well. So I do think Gene is going to be able to take shots from Diego Lopes while at the same time being a real threat to dropping Diego or even finishing Diego Lopes as well. So I essentially think Diego Lopes's most effective and most successful part of his game, being his physicality, is kind of taken away to an extent in this fight. Obviously, I do think Diego does have more skill. He is relatively good on the feet as well as he is very good on the ground in terms of his jiu-jitsu, but as I said, I think the best part of Diego Lopes's game is his physicality. And I think in this fight, that aspect, and really that best aspect of Lopes's game, is taken away, at least to an extent, in this fight versus Gene Silva. But the next reason for why I think Gene Silva is going to dominate Diego Lopes is due to his confidence. Because when you look around the UFC, most of these guys, or really all of these guys, have some level of confidence. All of these guys got to the UFC due to a level of success in other organizations. And even certain guys who had success in the UFC, of course, get even more confidence. But when you look around the UFC, there's just certain guys that have another level of confidence. And I think Gene Silva is kind of one of those guys. When you watch Gene fight out there, he just seems like he's in his happy place. He's very happy to be out there, he's very confident, he's very comfortable, and I think that really shines in his performances. Because I think when you're so comfortable and confident out there like Gene Silva is, that really allows you to do a couple of different things out there. It allows you to implement your game at a much better level than maybe some other guys who need to work their ways into a fight. And also, even if the fight isn't going Gene Silva's way, I think due to the fact that he's so confident and so comfortable out there, it's easier for a guy like him to make adjustments out there than maybe compared to some other guys in the UFC. So I do actually think the confidence level of Gene Silva is going to play a role in this fight versus Diego Lopes. Obviously, not to say that Diego Lopes isn't comfortable and confident out there, but I just think Gene Silva is at a little bit of a different level compared to Diego and really compared to most guys in the UFC. But if I had to give my official prediction for this matchup, as most of you probably guessed at this point, I would be leaning with Gene Silva. And I think Gene Silva is probably going to win by a 3rd or 4th round KO. I think early on, Diego is going to be able to eat a lot of the shots that Gene throws his way. As I touched upon before, Diego does have a really good chin and he is able to eat a lot of shots. I think we saw that specifically in his fight versus Volkanovski. As although Volkanovski is not known as a guy who punches extremely hard, he was able to land a bunch of power shots on Diego Lopes, and it didn't have much of an effect on Diego. So I think early on, some of the shots that Gene does land maybe will have somewhat of an effect, but I don't think it'll have that much of an effect to the level of potentially finishing him early on. But I think as the fight does progress in the 3rd or 4th round, I think at that point, Diego will start to get a little bit tired or maybe very tired. And I think at that point, Gene is going to start to really ramp things up, maybe go to the body a little bit more, maybe go to the head a little bit more. And I think at that point, there's a real chance that he can find the finish. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this fight. But I will say, I do think this fight is going to be an absolute banger. Both of these guys really go for it. They throw a lot of punches, they come forward, they have very fun fights in essentially all of the fights that they're in. And yes, it is unfortunate that we're not seeing Diego Lopes versus Yair Rodriguez, but at the end of the day, this fight alone, or this fight itself, is going to be a very, very fun one, and I think it's going to be a perfect main event for UFC Noche. Also, one thing I will say is if Gene Silva is able to win this fight, especially in dramatic fashion, I think he's probably going to get the next title shot versus Volkanovski or whoever has the title at that point. It is pretty interesting to see another guy in the UFC kind of get fast-tracked to a title based upon how good he is and based upon how exciting his fights are. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Gene Silva will dominate and destroy Diego Lopes, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out, guys.